I welcome you all in this session. As you are aware, in previous session we were working out couple of examples on estimation. As I have told you that statistics is of two types. The first one is descriptive statistics and the second one is inferential statistics. When we talk about inferential statistics, it has got two types again. You can have estimation and the other one is hypothesis testing. So, when I talk about inferential, it means we are trying to find out something about population through sample. So, that is what we have seen in estimation. We did estimate population mean through sample mean, we did estimate population proportion through sample proportion. We have looked at how to calculate even sample size in case of estimation of population mean and population proportion. So, we will continue with inferential statistics and today's topic is on hypothesis testing. We will look at first one sample test. So, you can have one sample test, two sample test and so on, right. So, let us look at what is hypothesis, but before defining hypothesis and how to test a particular hypothesis, there are several situations about which the decision makers want to know, or there are several questions for which the decision makers want to know the answers. So, let us take one of the questions is what container shape is most economical and reliable for shipping a product. So, you can have different types of shapes, maybe a cylindrical one or a conical one or some other shape, right. So, it depends on how far the product is to be transported from one place to another, what is the nature of the product and so on, right. If it is liquid, then you need a container of different shape size. If it is gas, then it is you need different type of container, right. So, this just one question. Let us say which management approach best motivates employees in retail industry. So, there are several approaches so far as management is concerned to motivate employees, right. So, in retail industry or let us say in banking industry or in insurance industry or auto industry and so on, right. How can the company's retirement investment financial portfolio be diversified for optimum performance? So, let us say if you have got some money and you want to invest in different portfolios. So, where you should invest in, right. So, this again one more decision. What is the most effective means of advertising in a business to business setting? There are n number of media available these days. So, where you should advertise your product, is not it? So, these are a couple of questions which decision makers want to know. So, when you search or when decision makers search for answers to questions, they often take help of business researchers, and business researchers often develop something called hypothesis. And hypothesis is nothing but hypothesis is tentative explanations of a principle operating in nature. So, hypothesis is something about which is there in the nature. It is about the existing theories and practices. It is about current situation. So, what is hypothesis? Hypothesis is tentative explanation of a principle operating in nature. There are different types of hypothesis. The first is research hypothesis, the second is statistical hypothesis, and third one is substantive hypothesis. Let us look at what is research hypothesis. So, research hypothesis is similar to what we have just defined. What we have defined? that it is tentative explanation of principle operating in nature, right. So, a research hypothesis is a statement of what the researcher believes will be the outcome of an experiment. You see what happens, decision makers on the basis of their experience, they know the outcome of a particular action. So, rather than taking action and looking at output or examining output, decision makers and business researchers, they know what would be the possible outcome of the experiment. So, without doing experiment, they know what would be the possible outcome. So, research hypothesis is what? Is a statement of what the researcher believes will be the outcome of an experiment or of a study. And as I said, just on the basis of their experience and their knowledge and previous work, they know what would be the possible outcome. So, let us look at some of the examples of research hypothesis. Let us say old workers are more loyal to a company in comparison to the new workers, right. So, this is just a research hypothesis. Companies with, let us say, asset more than $1 billion will spend more on, let us say, advertising. Their advertising budget would be more compared to those companies whose assets are, let us say, less than $1 billion, right. If we implement Six Sigma, then definitely the productivity would improve. So, this is again one more research hypothesis. Now, we do not know whether this hypothesis is true or not, we are just giving a research hypothesis. So, we have seen research hypothesis. What is research hypothesis? Research hypothesis is something which a researcher believes that this would be the outcome of an experiment. Now, what is statistical hypothesis? Statistical hypothesis is similar to research hypothesis, but the statisticians make little changes in research hypothesis from a statistical point of view, and they just rephrase it little bit. So, it is a more formal hypothesis structure, right. Otherwise, statistical hypothesis is same as research hypothesis. So, the moment we test research hypothesis, we will call it statistical hypothesis. So, business researchers want to prove the research hypothesis that older workers are more loyal to company. So, this is the hypothesis a business researcher has framed. What is the hypothesis? He wants to prove that old workers are more loyal to the company, and to know this hypothesis or to test this hypothesis, there will have to be let us say an instrument or a questionnaire. So, that questionnaire would be given to, let us say, old employees and new employees, and let us say the questions in questionnaire are on 5-point scale. So, on loyalty you can have 4 or 5 questions, and then you can compare mean of, let us say, 10 old workers and 10 new workers, right. So, if there is a difference, then we will say then we will say whether old employees are more loyal or not, right. So, the point here is, let us say on a 5-point scale, the mean of old workers on a loyalty scale is, let us say, 4.5, and for new workers it is 3.5. So, can we say that old workers are more loyal? So, this decision we have to take, how far or how much difference between these two would be considered as significant difference or not. So, we have to look at the proof threshold. What is the proof threshold? So, there is a standard procedure for statistical hypothesis testing. So, basically statistical hypotheses are of two types. You got null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis states that null condition exists. Null condition exists means the current situation will prevail, the current theories will prevail, nothing new is happening, right. The old theories are still true, the old standards are still correct and system is in control. So, this is about null hypothesis, or when you do not expect any change in the situation is null hypothesis, right. Null it is similar to 0, right. 0, there is no change in the existing system, that is null hypothesis. On the other hand, the alternative hypothesis actually challenges the status quo. The the alternative hypothesis will say that the old things have changed, the new theory is true, there are some new standards now and the system is out of control, something is happening, while in null hypothesis things are constant, right, as it is, nothing is moving, nothing is changing. So, let us look at couple of examples of null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Let us say a floor packaged by manufacturer is sold by weight and a particular size of package is supposed to average 40 ohms, right. So, let us say you are manufacturer of floor package and the weight of each package should be 40 ohms. Suppose manufacturer wants to test whether the packaging process is out of control. So, what he will do? He will test this hypothesis. He will pick up few bags, he will take the weightage of few bags, he will find out its mean and he will compare that mean with the population mean, right. And then he will take a decision whether process is in control or not. So, what is our null hypothesis? That average weight of the floor package is 40 ounces and there is no problem in the system is running absolutely fine. So, null hypothesis is 40, the weight of the package is 40 ounce. On the other hand, alternative hypothesis would be, it would challenge this statement and the challenge would be, no, the weight is not 40, it is either more than 40 or less than 40. So, this is how you would be writing alternative hypothesis. H A, H naught, this is null, right. So, H naught is equal to 40, H A, this alternative hypothesis is not equal to 40, right. So, this is an example of null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Let us look at one more example. Let us say the market share of your company is 18% and you have put in lots of efforts in your business, let us say in last 3 years, and you are expecting that your market share has gone up, right, and you are expecting that now the market share is more than 18% and you want to test this hypothesis. So, how to test this hypothesis? Let us say P is the market share or the proportion. So, we will say that H naught, null hypothesis is that market share is 18% and alternative hypothesis is market share is more than 18%. So, you may reject null hypothesis and you may not reject null hypothesis. It all depends on how you are choosing samples, and after choosing sample you are comparing it with the population mean. So, here a new idea, new theory that company officials want to prove is stated in the alternative hypothesis. This is something which you need to keep in mind. So, whatever you want to test is to be kept in alternative hypothesis, not in null hypothesis, right. So, business researchers only undertake an experiment to determine whether their new hypothesis is correct. They are hoping that the alternative hypothesis will be proven true. So, they would always like to prove alternative hypothesis, not the null hypothesis, right. So, let us look at the same example. In fact, most of the times researchers want to prove alternative hypothesis, right. Now, again it depends on situation. For example, in our floor packaging problem, the manager or the CEO of the company would like to prove that the process is in control, it has not moved out of control. So, he would like to ensure that the mean weight of the floor package is 40 ounces, right, and that he will write, he will not like to prove that the process is out of control, right. So, if a manufacturer is testing to determine whether his process is out of control as shown in floor packaging example, then he is most likely hoping that alternative hypothesis is not proven. So, he does not want weight to be more than or less than 40 ounces. So, he is most likely hoping that the alternative hypothesis is not proven true, thereby demonstrating that the process is still in control. So, he does not want to prove alternative hypothesis, and he will ensure that the process is in control. Now, the third type of hypothesis is substantial hypothesis. So, we have seen two hypotheses. The first one was research hypothesis, the second one was statistical hypothesis. In statistical hypothesis, we have got null and alternative hypothesis. The third one is substantial hypothesis or substantive hypothesis. Now, when the outcome of statistical study produces results that are important to the decision makers, so there has to be substantial change in the situation. Let us say my null hypothesis is that the average weight of a class is 45 kilograms, right, and my alternative hypothesis is that the weight is not 45 kilograms. Okay. So, I will pick up few students, I will measure their weights and I will compare it with the hypothesized mean, whatever I have hypothesized about the population. So, if there is large difference, then I will say that I will reject the null hypothesis, right. If population mean is closer to the sample mean, then I will not reject the null hypothesis. So, there has to be a substantial or significant difference between population mean and sample mean, and this decision would be taken by the decision makers or business researchers, whether the difference is significant or not. So, let us look at on a 5-point scale, wherein we have measured the loyalty of old employees. Let us say you have measured loyalty of old employees 2 years back on a 5-point scale. This was the average loyalty, and now it has gone up to 3.63. Now, is this substantial change? This is to be seen, right. Now, for some managers or for some researchers, this might be substantial change. For some of them, this might not be substantial change. So, it depends on once you test this particular hypothesis, then you will have to decide whether there is a substantial increase in loyalty or not. On the other hand, let us say increasing the average purchase price from let us say $55.45 to $55.50, and there is a large amount of products or large volume of finished product you are selling. So, that might be a substantial profit. So, you have to look at whether there is a substantial change in situation or not, right. So, both business researchers and decision makers should be aware that statistical significant results are not always substantive results. So, this point is to be taken care of, that statistically significant results are not always substantive results. Okay. Let us look at some more points related to hypothesis. So, what is hypothesis? When I say hypothesis, this I am talking about statistical hypothesis, right? Right, statistical hypothesis. So, statistical hypothesis or hypothesis is a claim about population parameter. So, decision maker or business researchers would be making certain assumption about population parameter, maybe population mean, population proportion, population standard deviation and so on, right. So, let us say one of the assumptions is, or one of the hypotheses is, the mean monthly cell phone bill in this city is 42 rupees, right, or let us say 420 rupees, is not it. So, this is just an assumption. Now, the manager of the cell phone company would be thinking that whether this mean is 42 rupees or 420 rupees, or it has gone up. So, this is about population parameter, right, not about sample statistics. So, you can have one more hypothesis, population proportion. The proportion of adults in the city with cell phone is 68% or 0.68. This is just one more assumption. Now, the researcher would test this particular hypothesis, whether the adults having cell phone are 68% or more than that or less than that, right. So, whenever we test statistical hypothesis, as I said, you have to have null hypothesis. So, generally you always have null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. So, it is about the states the claim or assertion to be tested, right. Let us look at one more hypothesis. The average number of TV sets in Indian homes is equal to 3. So, this is just a hypothesis, and let us call it null hypothesis, because you want to test whether the number of TV sets in Indian homes are 3 or not. So, this is null hypothesis, this is H naught and this mean, we are talking about mean, right. So, this is equal to 3, right. So, null hypothesis or hypothesis is always about population parameter, right, not about sample statistics, right. So, you can't say that null hypothesis is x bar is equal to 3. No, this is not, this would be incorrect. So, we always use population parameter, right, not sample statistics. So, null hypothesis begins with the assumption that the null hypothesis is true. So, it is similar to the notion of innocent until proven guilty. So, as we have already mentioned that null hypothesis is about that old theories are still true, there is no changes taking place, or there is a status quo maintained, right. It refers to status quo, as I said, always contains these types of symbols. So, your null hypothesis can be equal to or less than or greater than type, less than equal to or greater than or equal to, right. So, may or may not be rejected. Okay. Let us look at alternative hypothesis, though we have already talked about alternative hypothesis. It challenges the status quo. So, what is our null hypothesis? The average number of TV sets in Indian homes is 3, right, and alternative hypothesis that they are not equal to 3. So, either less than 3 or more than 3, right. So, it challenges the status quo, it challenges the old theories, it challenges the existing things, it challenges the existing system, or it challenges that the system is out of control, things have changed, may or may not be proven, is generally the hypothesis the researcher is trying to prove, as we have mentioned earlier as well, right. So, a researcher would always try to prove alternative hypothesis. Okay. So, let us look at how do we write this null and alternative hypothesis. So, null hypothesis is 100, let us say population mean is 100. Alternative hypothesis can be it is not equal to 100, right. So, this is not equal to 100, or population mean is more than 100 or less than 100. So, these are only 3 possibilities. So, either population mean is 100, if not 100 then what could happen? Not equal to 100. The moment you say not equal to 100, it will have 2 more options, right, either more than 100 or less than 100, is not it. So, this is alternative hypothesis. Now, there is a hypothesis testing process similar to what we have seen in case of estimation process, right. In estimation process, what we did estimate population parameter from sample statistics, but in hypothesis what do? We assume about population parameter and then we try to prove or disprove that. So, that is the major difference. So, let us take an example. Let us say that the population mean is 50, the age of the population is 50. So, null hypothesis is H naught mu 50, otherwise it is not 50. So, either you write H1 or HA, one and the same thing, right. Sample the population and find the sample mean. So, to prove this that the age is not 50, we will take sample from the population. So, this is your population, we will take a sample from this population and then we will find out the sample mean. Let us take for simplicity sample mean is 20. Now, we will say that we are assuming that the population mean is 50, but sample mean is 20. So, we will say that the sample mean is too small, right. So, we will try to we will reject this null hypothesis, right. So, getting a sample mean of 20 is so unlikely if the population mean was 50. So, you conclude that the population must not be 50. So, you will reject the null hypothesis. So, you can say the same thing in this way. If it is unlikely that you would get a sample mean of 20, when in fact 50 was the population mean, then you reject the null hypothesis that mean is 50. So, with this let me stop here. Let me remind what we did in today's session. We discussed about hypothesis, we discussed about types of hypothesis, we have seen research hypothesis, statistical hypothesis. In statistical we have seen null and alternative hypothesis, and we have seen substantial hypothesis, right. And we have seen how the hypothesis testing process works. So, there is a population, you take a sample and you compare population mean and sample mean, or let us say population proportion and sample proportion, and then you take a call whether your hypothesis was true or not. So, thank you very much.